Hey everybody, thanks for coming. Those of you that are in here, those of you that are online, my name's Nathaniel. It's nice to meet you all. Hopefully you're here for the Cougars Care workshop series, because if you're not, you're in the wrong place. So leave, I don't know, but hopefully you're here for this. And if you're not, you can still stay. I mean, I think it's a cool workshop. But anyways, I'm glad you're all here. Today is our first workshop for the 22-23 year here. So in terms of what we're going to be talking about today, we'll hopefully be here for the next somewhere between hour and a half together. We're going to be focusing on recognizing somebody in need, right? And so as we do that, a couple of things to keep in mind: respect others' opinions, respect the fact that everybody's coming to this at a different location. Some of you might be like psych majors or social work majors, so like heard a lot of this already. Some of you might be like bio majors or English majors or something and not have talked about any of this stuff really before. So feel free to ask questions. There's not going to be a lot of like intense sharing asked of you here, because we want to keep this more of a classroom feel, but we are talking about sensitive topics. And if somebody does share something personal, we ask that you please just, not spread that around places. Just respect each other's privacy. And then as always, throughout this time here, please feel free to take a step away if you need to. Everybody in the room anyway has their coffee or their energy drink or whatever, I can tell, because it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday. So bathrooms are right through this door here if you need to find them. Also, we will be talking about mental health topics, including self-injury, assault, things like these, which are triggering in some cases. So take time away if you need to, no problems. While we're at it, I should introduce Ray here is at the computer for us. She's going to be monitoring the chat for those of you that are on Zoom. You can post any questions, direct message to, I think you're signed in as Nathaniel Fernandez though. So DM Nathaniel Fernandez if you need anything, or Cheyenne, one of our team members as well, is on the Zoom helping monitor that. So any questions those of you that have on Zoom, you can ask there, and Ray will get my attention and I'll make sure to address them. Any of you that are in here, just raise your hand or call out or whatever. Sound good to everybody? Okay, great. Let's get into it. So today, we're going to start talking about some mental health trends at APU, and then we're going to go into the actual thing that hopefully we're here for today, which is the skills to recognize, respond, refer, and report somebody that is in mental health crisis or mental health need. And then finally, we'll cover some helpful resources at APU, including the counseling center, because I'm a homer and I always put advertisements in for the counseling center whenever I speak. So that'll be kind of our outline. Throughout it, we'll kind of stop at certain points. We'll get into groups and interact a little bit so you can have a bit of time to practice the skills. But yeah, next slide. So obviously this is a school, so our primary concern here is that you do well academically. And this is unfortunately something that's very difficult to do when you're stressed out, right? This is our most recent data from the National College Health Assessment Survey. This is actually pre-pandemic data because they haven't done their next round of data collection yet. So actually we'd expect these numbers are actually increased nowadays. But a full 38% of folks have done significantly worse academically because of their stress levels in the last 12 months. 23% of folks aren't sleeping, and that's causing them to fail out of classes. Same thing, depression about 18% there, relationship stress 11%, right? And so this stuff really matters for your academics, but it also matters for your well-being, and that's what I care about, and that's what I hope you guys care about too, in addition to grades. You can give me the next slide, Ray. And so these are mental health trends that are specific to APU as of the last data gathering. Again, I know I'm boring you with stats, but 91% of students have felt overwhelmed at some point in the last 12 months, 88% exhausted, 75% very sad, 70% lonely, at least one time in the last 12 months, 66% anxious, 58% hopeless, 45% depressed, And even 13% of APU students have considered suicide in the last 12 months. And so there were 30 folks signed up for our program today between online and in person here. So that means at least 3 people in this room. And so it's pretty sobering stats when you start to think about it that way. And it can get to the point where you think like, what can I even do? Or how can I even respond to this? This is so out of my league, but if I'm struggling through something like this, or one of my good friends is struggling through something like this, what do I even do? So we could get the next slide. So I want to give you a little bit of Matthew here, just to kind of pick us back up for those of us that are Christians in the audience. Jesus promises us that all authority in heaven and earth has been given to him. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing, etc. And remember, I am with you always to the very end of the age. So we get really scared when we have to think about responding to this amount of need on campus by ourselves, or to help our friends out by ourselves. We have to remember that we're not alone, right? God and the Holy Spirit are with us through all of this, but also so are the resources and the community that you have around you here at APU, outside of APU, etc. So I'm hoping that I can make this argument today that whether you find yourself in the role as a friend, or as a roommate, or as a brother or a sister, other family member, right, of somebody who's going through a mental health crisis, you don't feel like you need to take on saving them by yourself, but feel you can be empowered to take on that specific role, care within that role, and find out how to connect them to professional counselors or doctors or things like that. So that's my goal for today. And that's the basis of the next slide, which is recognize, respond, refer, and report. So that's a handout that I've given to all of you. How'd you know if you didn't get one there up here in the front? And those of you online, Ray's gonna drop the handout in the chat as well as a file transfer. And then if you can give me the next slide whenever you have transferred it. So I want us to walk through this kind of with like a fake example of a student named Pat, right? So in this fake example, Pat is an 18-year-old biblical studies major and an MEL scholar. You notice that Pat's appearance always is a bit disheveled, that he has dark rings under his eyes. Much of the time he seems preoccupied, unable to focus during meetings and work. So our 4 R's, our first R is recognize. By show of hands or by throwing it in the chat online, what do we recognize here about Pat that might indicate that he might be going through something?
He's not sleeping enough.
He's not sleeping enough, right? Dark rings under his eyes, clearly. What else? That's great. Yeah. Inability to focus is a huge one. Inability to focus and sleep are both huge ones that get messed up in almost any type of distress you might be feeling. You probably all already know that. I don't have to tell you that already. Anytime you're feeling very sad, very scared, very whatever, those kind of things are going to get thrown off. Anything else? He looks disheveled, right? So I always like to make the half-hearted joke that this is college. Like, you guys don't have to show up like super dressed up. This is not like a business setting. But when you are friends with somebody or you know somebody and their like appearance is markedly different than usual, like maybe they're always slobby, but now they like smell really bad or something, or maybe not that way, right? Maybe they're always on point and now they're like not wearing makeup or whatever. It's not about the actual appearance itself, but rather the change in grooming patterns that indicates if somebody is oftentimes going through something. And then last couple to point out, Pat's 18 years old, so we know that many of our 18-year-old students are first-year freshmen, right? Which is a huge transition year if you're coming straight from college, right? Which is a bit of an assumption, but could be something extra that he's going through. Also, the MEL Scholar Program. Are any of you MEL scholars? All right, unfortunately not. It's a super cool program, but it's a super hard program too. And so this is something to keep in mind too when you're thinking about something somebody's going through, not just how they're looking, but what you know about what's going on in their life and the stressors that they might be experiencing. So great job. Next slide, please. So it all kind of comes down to this stuff here, like I was talking about, the obvious signs. So we saw already like the marked deterioration in personal hygiene. Pat was looking a mess. He had those dark rings under his eyes, right? But this also goes with if your friend is super drunk or way too high all the time, or they're screaming and yelling uncontrollably randomly, they're having bizarre thoughts or not making any sense, having hallucinations, these kinds of things. That's pretty obvious, right? Please don't ignore signs like that when you see signs like that. Talk to them, see if we can get them help. We'll talk about how you do that in a moment. We're just talking about recognizing now. But I also want to talk about some less obvious signs. If you can give me the next slide, Ray. So that's where all this other kind of stuff falls in, right? We already talked about the concentration difficulty, right? Falls in there. Sleeplessness. Sometimes even excessive procrastination can be a thing. I don't know if any of y'all have felt that before, but just the stress that you go through trying to like get anything done because you're too scared to get it done or because you just are too depressed to get it done, right? So I hear a lot of people saying, oh, I feel like I've been so lazy recently. Well, maybe we all go through bouts of laziness sometimes, but I'm much more likely to think that a person who's feeling themselves to be extra lazy may be going through something at that time that's making that kind of thing happen. So then I've got a whole bunch more slides on here. If you can kind of give me a few of these, Ray. If you're online, seeing all their interactions on the social media or whatever, psychologists study everything. So like if people like use depressing colors like dark blues and blacks and things, or you take a lot of pictures that don't have people in them, that can be actually signs of distress or depression. Who would have thought? It also could be, your friend's just an artist or whatever. So like that's not in and of itself a thing to get worried about. But things that you should know about. Can I have the next one? Changes in behavior can be important to notice. Disengagement in virtual experiences. This is hopefully we're doing less and less Zoom meetings. Sorry for those of you that are on Zoom today, but those kinds of things I'm sure we all struggle through as we were doing that more often. And then if anybody just says that they're not doing good, we should take them as their word. Verbal cues talking about loneliness, hopelessness, all these kinds of things. And the next slide, Rick. So with all of that, now you guys are hopefully experts at this recognizing stuff. You express your concern for Pat's well-being and you ask him how he's been doing lately. He immediately breaks down, tearfully admitting to you that he's been feeling miserable ever since the breakup with the girlfriend 3 weeks ago. He relates he can't sleep, can't concentrate, has no motivation for anything anymore. Goes on to confide in you that he's done trying to do school and is considering dropping out of APU. So what do people see here? Again, shout them out. Massive life change is always huge, right? Not just no motivation, but no motivation for anything too, which show you can see it's serious. Right, like that huge emotional display. I don't think huge emotional displays are bad, but if you have like a huge emotional display that you're just barely keeping down, such that when anybody asks you anything about it, like you break down, right? That clearly shows you're under a lot of stress. Anything else? Okay. The other one to notice here is considering dropping out, right? That's another huge life choice. Now, maybe Pat should drop out. I don't know. I've never met Pat. That's a fake individual, right? But that's not the point. Anytime we're considering a major life change, that could be another thing that we're seeing. Especially if anybody's distressed, they shouldn't make that choice, right? You shouldn't decide to go to college or decide not to go to college based on when you're in the middle of something. You should try to calm down first and then make the choice, kind of thing. Okay, sound good to everybody? Anybody have any questions so far on the recognizing stuff that we've done? Okay, great. So we'll go ahead and jump to the next slide there. I have some handouts here. I didn't expect to have as many of you as are here today, which is awesome. So we're gonna have to share. We're gonna get in groups of 4 or 5, and we're gonna kind of go through some of these handouts. But how do we respond after we recognize something? And so I have a whole bunch of tips up here for you in terms of what we should do when we're responding. But basically, we want to connect with the person. We want to let them know that they're seen, that they're heard, that they're understood, right? Especially if they're trusting you with stuff that they're not telling necessarily a lot of people, because it's probably not something that we talk about a lot. Things that hurt us are not something that we're typically writing posts about, you know? And so take your time, take a person seriously, don't blow it off. And then communicate concern. You can use some of these listening skills thing. SOLAR is one of the acronyms that we use. It means square up your posture. So if I'm like, I'll look into the camera for the people that are online. But I would square up my posture to whoever I'm talking to. I would, open myself up, eye contact. You usually lean in slightly to show that you're paying attention to someone. And then the R is for relax, because you don't want to try and bring more energy into a place that is already full of whatever's going on with them. And know the fact that you've been making friends and talking to people since you were, I don't know, however old you were, probably fairly young for most of us, right? Your goal when you're responding to somebody in distress isn't to necessarily use all kinds of fancy techniques or something like that, unless you guys are trained and licensed therapists, which I don't think we are. Maybe some of you are studying to become one, and that would be great in the future when you become one. But the main goal is just to treat another person like a person, make them feel heard and understood, right? Not have to do anything different or special, just make them know. If I can get the next one. A couple things not to do. One is to leave anybody with suicidal thoughts alone. Not that you should like camp out someplace with somebody just because they are, you know, having these kinds of thoughts, but connect them to appropriate mental health resources before taking off. We'll go over those in a moment. But don't debate or argue or lecture about morality. This is a huge one, especially when like sometimes what people are stressed out about intersects with social mores, right? We were just talking about that one about your buddy that's selling a ton of weed. Like, you may have thoughts about that. You may not have thoughts about that, right? Or relationship stuff. There was that negative relationship that the one woman is in, right? Or maybe it's coming down to, you know, we got the midterms coming up again. America is highly politically divided. I'll have to tell you guys that. You're living through it just like we all are, right? When somebody's going through it, there's no need to try and change their mind or tell them about this new thing, or they're not thinking about it right, or, you know, their religious beliefs are wrong, and if they start religiously believing like you, they'll feel so much better. That's not useful or helpful to them. But also, don't challenge somebody's beliefs about themselves either. This one's a little bit more confusing. It can kind of be obvious not to debate somebody who's going through something. But oftentimes when somebody's really down, we may want to tell them, no, like, you're the best person ever. Maybe say like, there's no reason for me to be here. Say, no, like, everyone loves you. You know, everybody cares about you. You're the best person I've ever met. You need to change. What are you talking about when you're saying like, oh, I'm so suicidal, or oh, I'm so lonely, or oh, I'm so this or so that, right? And obviously that encouragement comes from a really good place, and it's probably true, right? You know, if you're talking to your friend and you're saying like, no, you clearly matter and are clearly a good person, yeah, that's why you're their friend, right? You know, but if somebody's really going through it, they can't take that in at that moment. So instead of saying to somebody who's really, really depressed and saying like, you know, nothing's worth it anymore, nobody cares about me, instead of saying, everybody cares about you. What are you talking about? You're the best. Instead saying something like, wow, I appreciate you sharing that with me. Like that has to be so hard to be feeling that, you know. I can't imagine what it would be like to be in that space where you don't think anybody cares about you at all, right? That's a connection first, rather than trying to change what they're feeling about themselves, right? You see what I'm saying? See what I'm kind of trying to drive at? Okay. So next, we're gonna go ahead and get into pairs this time. All right, great. So we're halfway through our recognize, respond here. We're gonna finish up with refer and report. We can get the next slide. So some additional questioning of our illustrious Pat has convinced him that there's still hope that things can get better. He's not sure what to do next. You ask him if he wants to get help connected to APU resources that likes this idea. So next slide, please. This is when we refer folks. Again, you're not expected to solve everybody's problems because you're not a counselor, you're not a doctor, you're not a nutritionist, you're not a tutor. Maybe you are some of these things, right? But even if you are, when your friends come and talk to you, you're not that to them necessarily, right? My family always likes to make jokes when I got my psychology degree. They're like, oh, you're gonna have to fix my problems now, right? And I'm like, no, because I don't want to, but also because you're not paying me. So, and it would be unethical. But so anyways, like I have a different role in those situations where I'm a family member. So even if I have technically skills to help counsel emotionally distressed people, it wouldn't be effective with like my uncle. He needs to go see somebody that's not his nephew, right? So when you just go ahead, recognize and respond to something empathically, the next step is to link them out to the professional resource that can actually help them solve their problem. And that's going to be very different based on whatever the need is, right? A lot of the stuff we've been talking about today have been mental health scenarios, right? Because this is the counseling center workshop, Cougars Care. So, I mean, that's what we're at. But, you know, maybe somebody's struggling spiritually. We have our Office of Campus Ministry here, obviously. Maybe somebody's struggling in terms of their financial aid services, or maybe they're struggling with their classes. They need to go to the tutoring center or something like that, right? And so all of these different services are all available to you as APU students, and something that I would highly encourage you to take advantage of. In fact, you probably have more services available to you right now than you will after you graduate, because that's just kind of, APU is kind of a cool place like that. So get your counseling services in now, but you have access to 100% free, 100% confidential services. So you can get the next slide on there. This is the University Counseling Center information. So I would like to encourage you all to get out your phones in the middle of class here and take a picture of this slide. It's also probably an excuse to check the text messages or whatever. But we are here, we're in the Shire Mods in Magnolia Court. So walk past the baseball field, you will find us right next to the health center. All of our services are 100% free, 100% confidential, and that's HIPAA confidential. So it's a higher level of confidentiality than like if you were to go talk to your professor or your mentor or something about it. If there's something that you really want to talk confidentially about, campus pastor's office, student health center, or the university counseling center, those are your three high level confidentiality options on campus. We also have a 24/7 hour line that you can always call. Again, we mentioned like if somebody is self-harming or if somebody's suicidal, or if you find yourself self-harming or if you're suicidal, please call us anytime 24/7 at that number, and there's always somebody available to help. Next slide. This is where we're at. There used to be a beautiful magnolia tree here. That's why it was called Magnolia Court. That died, so then they planted this tree. This tree has since died and got ripped out. So if you go there now, there's these shrubs are still there. The shrubs can't die. They're like invincible shrubs, I guess. But like there's no tree there anymore. But the health center door and our door right there, if you walk towards in and out, basically, that way, technically. Next slide. If anybody has a weapon or is already harmed themselves or already ingested a harmful substance or something like that, please call 911 instead of calling us. That'll be a very, very rare case, but just so you know. Next slide. And then finally, the last R in our 4 R's is report. And this one is the one that feels the weirdest because like reporting sounds like snitching and that sounds bad, right? We'd highly encourage you whenever you yourself are going through something or whenever somebody you know is going through something to report it to somebody at the university. And the reason for that is that we have something called APU Cares. Have any of you heard of APU Cares before? Okay, a couple nods. Cool, cool, cool. So I don't know about you. Whenever I'm going through something, it's like extremely hard to figure out like who I'm supposed to call, what form I'm supposed to fill out, what number I'm supposed to fax it to in order to get the thing that I need for the blah, blah, blah. Like it's really annoying and frustrating. And if I'm already going through anxiety attacks, or if I'm already super depressed, or if I'm already like grieving a loved one and I can't get to class, like I can't figure out who I need to call to let them know about that. So that's why we have our APU Cares team. It's a multidisciplinary university team of folks that.
I hiccuped, I'm
Oh, sorry. No, you're totally fine. That come together and are aware of all the different resources. And then so if you are dealing with something, they'll email you and they'll be like, hey, we heard that you're going through this. We have like, oh, maybe you're going through homelessness right now. Here we have maybe some temporary housing funds, or you know, do you need to go to our food pantry or whatever? Here's exactly where it is. Here are the hours. Here's how you do that kind of thing. Or hey, you know, we heard that you have going through a big family thing and you might need to take a leave of absence to go take care of your mom because she's really sick or whatever. Here's like somebody that can walk you through those forms together and talk about all of your different options so that you don't have to try and figure it all out on your own kind of thing. So in my opinion, I think that can be really, really helpful. So that's the reporting section of things. So we are almost done here. We're actually running really good on time. So we will finish out with our call to action. So again, just right around you in your little breakout groups that we've been in. All right. Thank you all very much. Hopefully you learned something useful and interesting for today. We're gonna have plenty of time for questions, like I said, because we ended up a little bit early, which is awesome. But before you go, if you want to advance the slide one more time, Ray.
Sure.
Today is recognizing a friend in need. Thank you for coming out. Hopefully you enjoyed yourselves. We're going to be in this room and on this Zoom for the next 5 weeks. Next week is becoming a better listener. Then we're doing depression, anxiety, relationships, and goal setting. So come back out if you want to come back out to any of these, or if you need more summer credits or whatever, we'd love to have you.